In this lesson, we discover how routing works. The objectives for this lesson are to learn the many ways to use the route attribute, bind parameters, pass parameters on the query line, and parameter constraints. Every route within a web API must be unique, and we use the route attribute to provide that uniqueness. We can apply multiple route attributes to the same method, so the same endpoint can actually be gotten to via different routes. Now we can bind parameters using curly braces in the route attribute. So we saw this before, but you see the curly braces there? So that way you pass the parameters right on the URL following these slashes. We can also pass parameters using a query string, and we can bind those up to parameters that we pass into the endpoint as well. So lots of different ways that we can use routing here. Well, let's take a look at using the route attribute. I'm going to go under controllers here, and I'm going to remove those first couple of ones we created, the product entity controller and the product iAction controller. Let's just go ahead and get rid of those because we're not going to use them too much anymore. And then let's go in here and let's take the get method here and let's copy this. And let's paste it right back in. We'll just give it a new name, get all, for instance. Now, if we run this, I'm going to show you what happens here. So we get this weird error, fetch error. Well, that really doesn't tell us a lot, does it? If we were to go over to the console window, okay, so now we can look in here and we can see a little bit more information. Let's kind of bring this out a little bit. So it says that an unhandled exception has occurred while executing the request. We also see conflicting method path combination. Okay, well, we're getting a little clearer here. Actually, let's run this one more time. And what we're going to do is we're going to type this right in on the URL line up here where we do /API/product. Now that's a little bit better error message. We're going to get ambiguous match exception. The request matched multiple endpoints. When you just have HTTP GET, it really doesn't know what you're talking about if you have two methods. So you can't just vary by the method name. In C#, that's, we can change it, the same signature, as long as it has a different name. That doesn't work for routing in Web API. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a different route attribute here on the getAll method that we copied in. Because now this is the base route here, this get, because it doesn't have any route. So that means if you just have /API/product, this is where it's going to go if you're doing a GET request. But by adding this second route here, as long as we had that route with a different name, that now provides uniqueness. So when we run this now we see this different GET. And there we go. We now have two different routes because they are distinguished by that route attribute. Instead of just copying a method and giving it a different route, if we do want the exact same functionality, we can apply multiple URLs to the same endpoint. Let's take a look. So go up here to the first get that we had, and look what I'm doing. I'm adding a route with no route, that's the default, and then getAll and then getAll products. And let's go ahead and just remove this other one that we created, the getAll. We still have the get with the ID being passed in, but now what we have are three different ways to get at this same method, this same action method here that creates an endpoint for us in our route. So now you can see there's our normal one that we've had all along. I just more explicitly defined it as opposed to just leaving it as the default. That one works. We go over to the next one, try it out. We get the exact same results that we got on the other one. So they're all executing the same thing. So multiple ways to get at the same endpoint. Now, I'm not saying you're going to do this very often, but it is something that you are allowed to do. Now, just like the get that we have there that we pass an ID to, what if we wanted to pass something else like a category ID and get all products by a specific category ID? Let's take a look at how that one works. I went ahead and removed all the route attributes from that original get, but let's now add another method down here. So now you can see this route. It's called by category // and then within the curly braces, I'm putting the parameter name that I'm going to use on this method. Now, the method doesn't need to match the route. It's a method name. It doesn't matter. But the parameter does need to match. Let's go ahead and just try this out. It doesn't do anything. It literally just, does a console.writeLine on whatever we pass in just to prove that we can do this. So when we try this out, let's say that we used a category ID of 18, for instance. What I look at here is we have now the request. Notice the request URL. So that is /API/product/by category /18. Okay, so this tells us basically that we can pass things right on the URL line, just like we did when we were requesting just a single ID, right? The product ID, but we've added a different route name by category. What if we have more than one parameter that we want to pass to the route? Well, we can do that as well. Let's add another method here. Now take a look at this one. This one actually has by name and price /name / and then curly braces name, which matches to the parameter that we see here, /list price / and then the list price. So we're going to pass in two things here. All right, and then of course we would do whatever query we're going to do. I'm just illustrating the different ways that you can lay out these parameters coming in. Okay, so let's run this one then. Take a look here. So now we've got this one. And again, if we have the name, we can set it here to like HL and the list price to like 1,000. And then again, what's important here is look at the request URL. So you can see how we're doing /API/product/by name and price /name / and then the name that we want /list price / and then the list price that we want. So that's how you would make this particular call. Now there's another way to do it. So I'm just trying to show you all the various ways that we can do routing here, where we can pass multiple query parameters on the query string. Now what's kind of nice about this one is that we could leave one or others off and then we'll get a null there, whereas on the other ones you would actually have to still use like /name and then something /list price. So let's take a look at passing multiple query parameters on the query string. Let's go ahead and add another method. Now look at this one. The route is very simple. Search by name and price. Now we have a method, search by name and price, that has string name and decimal list price. If you don't put the curly braces up in the route, then it's assuming that you're going to pass things on the query string. So let's run this and let's take a look at how we would make this call. And again, you have to love Swagger for this, right? How it gives you this, this tells you what to put in here. So you would do like an R and then maybe 3,000 or something like that. And when we execute, you can now see the URL /API/product/search by name and price, name equals R, and then all other key value pairs are separated by an ampersand. So ampersand list price equals 3,000. So if we were to go over and look at the console window, you would see those values have indeed been passed to each of the different parameters. So we come over here and we see the R and the 3,000. One of the things that's really neat about the MVC model here is we can do parameter constraints. We can apply a data type and validation constraints to parameters. We separate each one with a colon. So here you can see on the route product by ID, ID : int. So we're specifying after the colon there what data type we're expecting the user to pass. And then another one, route product by ID, it might be ID : int min1, and you can specify a minimum value, a maximum value. There's all sorts of different parameter constraints that we can use. So the data type constraints are alpha, bool, date time, decimal, double, float, GUID, int, and long. The validation constraints that we have are length, max, max length, min length, range, regex. And we can even create our own custom constraints if we want. And we implement the iHTTP route constraint interface. And we create a match method that we check the data being passed in, and then we return a true or false of whether or not it's valid. Let's take a look at applying parameter constraints to one of our endpoints. Let's use the by name and price here, and we'll put a colon after name and type in alpha because we want only alphanumeric characters here. And for the list price, we're going to do decimal as far as the data type constraint, and then we're going to do a min 1. So we're saying the list price has to be 1 or greater. And if we now run this, and we try this out, okay, I want you to notice over here under the parameters, notice list price now says it should be a number, and name says it should be a string. So we can put whatever in here. Let's put in a -1, and if I try to execute, okay, it's not going to let me go, right? It's not going to do anything. It's saying 404 error not found because it's telling us, hey, that's not allowed. It has to be 1 or greater for that list price. In this lesson, we saw that we have a lot of options for defining routes. Now, personally, I only use the route attribute when I need it. If I've just got a controller, it just has a get, and that's all I'm doing, there's no reason to have the route attribute. We can pass parameters on the URL line. We can pass parameters using a query string. And we can add parameter constraints to ensure that we get good data in. Coming up next, using dependency injection.